we're still handcuffed by two very powerful sort of political orthodoxies that have been sort of handed down through the generations, even among sort of Democrats and sort of progressive politicians. One is what we call the pollution paradigm. The kind of continuing focus on this as a pollution problem that's going to be solved primarily through caps or making dirty sources of energy more expensive. And this is still sort of the Green Orthodoxy in Washington, and the result of that is that there's sort of a continuing sort of fixation on binding caps. This is actually getting in the way of a lot of the innovation, the policy innovation that we need. It's resulting in sort of these bloated, extraordinarily complex cap and trade proposals where no one's willing to admit that we're going to kind of constrain the costs of those programs, which means that any cap is not binding because we're not willing to pay whatever it would cost to comply with the cap. So that's one thing that's really constraining us. It's the continuing desire to kind of take a way of thinking about pollution problems that worked for us reasonably well with things like conventional air pollution, water pollution, and applying that to a new set of problems that actually they're not appropriate solutions to or an appropriate mental model for approaching the problem. Frankly, the second orthodoxy is sort of there's still a market fundamentalism that really infuses both parties. So we still have this idea that all of this innovation we need is sort of going to come from the private sector, when in fact when we look at really transformational technological innovations, and particularly innovations that really kind of radically get into the market, most of that innovation is done in the public sector and with public funding, not with private funding and not by the private sector. That is the case with the information technology. It's actually been the case with biomedical technology. If you look at all of the big kind of technological revolutions that have transformed our economy, transformed American society over the last 50 or 60 years, almost every one of them started not only with lots of federal support for the research, but also lots of federal support for the deployment of those technologies. And it was direct federal support. But we still have this idea that the federal government doesn't do this well, that we can't have government picking winners and losers, and that really we need to sort of try to get the rules right and let the private sector do this. So that's a huge handicap.